Hi there folks, I'm back with another one of my last past tutorials. This one is going to be on the deployment phase and movement in your tactical battles here for Grand Tactician, the Civil War. In the last video we talked all about how to deal with the information that you get on screen to figure out what's going on, and today we're kind of talking about how to situate yourself, pretty much everything except for the attack and the defense. So we'll get into it. If you end up liking the video, the one thing I would ask that since we are a micro channel here, if you do go ahead and hit the like video, it will give the heads up to the YouTube algorithm to push this out to more folks who might be looking for it. If you have comments, this is certainly a place to leave them. This is very much meant to be an introduction to those who are just coming to the game, and we're trying to take it step by step. And so additional comments there would certainly point folks in the right direction. All right, let's get into deployment. All right, so some just early considerations. If you can't rotate your tactical map like you should be able to with hotkeys, the reason is likely that you have your HQ reports out. So in order to do that, you can rotate them. Now Q and E should be able to rotate, but that's just a little tip. Otherwise, it's frustrating if the map is locked like this. You want some convenience wherever you can get it. So anyways, that's that. What you want to look at next is where can you deploy, and blue will always be Union, red will always be CSA. So in this map, the line out here shows us our maximum area that we can deploy as the Union. If we try to deploy beyond that, it kind of moves us up as close as it can to that, but see, I'm trying to deploy in Winchester, and they just smash everybody right on the boundary. So that is kind of how far you can deploy. The next thing you want to take a look at is whether you're defending, attacking, or whether it's a meeting engagement. So there are three little things, or three different kind of quick tools, I don't know, heads up things that would just tell you quickly kind of whether you are defending, attacking, or you need to kind of race for the victory points. So if you're not sure what victory points are because you are really new, that's okay. These things here, they always look like shields to me, and then they have a number inside, but that's an objective. And a lot of maps in campaign only have one objective, and there are a certain amount of points. Basically, the more points they have, the better they are to hold. And so when it says defend, what it actually means is that you have a majority of the victory points if there are more than one objectives. If you have two arrows that point in towards one another, it's telling you there's a meeting engagement, in which case the objectives haven't been claimed yet. And so there's kind of a race to see who gets to defend and who has to attack first. And then if you have to attack, I believe it's 3 arrows pointing up to a horizontal line. And when you hover over it, it will tell you that you have to attack, and it will always show you where the objective is. So even if the objective had spawned over here, it would tell us there's a 5-pointer over here, and all we would know is that we have to go get it. So those are your kind of early considerations. We know right now that we could deploy almost on half the map, which is really generous. We know that we're able to defend, and maybe the last thing I'll note is that the game kind of cheats you with AI, or with information in a good way, in that it will tell you where the points of entry are for the other side. They may not always use all of them, but they are possible points of entry. So these are CSA entry points. This is a Union playthrough. This is a Union one, right, blue. And then sometimes they're white, in which case, let's see, yeah, we have a white one right here. It hasn't been claimed by either side. And so what that tells us is that we know we have to defend this, and that the attack is likely to come from this direction. So knowing that, we can kind of start planning how we're going to make use of our deployment phase. Now that we have a decent grasp as to kind of the meta of this battle, we can hang back and defend. We can, because what happens is, so again, if you're not really familiar with the battles and how they work, and it will depend a little bit on the settings you choose when it comes to victory points. Basically, if you sit on those objectives, they will push things more in your favor. So you can see each side kind of gets four different things, and it's a calculation, and eventually enough casualties and routes happen that the battle goes one way or the other. And you'll see that for both they have objectives, and it starts at a 0.0. And again, depending on your settings, as long as you hold one for longer, eventually the battle, all things being equal, ends up going in your favor. So we know that in this one, the CSA kind of has to come get us because the clock is against them. And usually the AI in general is just going to use roads. It doesn't do a whole lot of, particularly before it encounters your troops, it's mostly going to stick to the roads. And so we know from those entry points that there's this turnpike into Winchester, and then it moves south, and then there's this straight shot through that takes them to, I don't know, around Milton. And so we would expect the CSA to eventually end up somewhere over here. We could deploy, right? Just because you can deploy this far up doesn't mean you have to, but we want to try to keep them away from this position here. Next thing you're going to want to take a look at, and I will say this is a Whiskey and Lemons playthrough. I think there's something not quite right in these. We have an absurd amount of engineering points. It will, unless you're doing it this way or you've just done other things in campaign to get a lot, usually your engineering points will be closer to 1 to 10% of what you're seeing here. So it's not a whole lot, but you can get a lot of basic constructions done fairly cheaply. You don't need a whole lot of engineering points to do a little, and you don't have to build stuff necessarily to have a strong defensive position. All right, so this is our position. I generally probably play a bit too far forward for my own good. If you've seen any of the campaigns, you know that's true. But I'm looking to try to defend out and just give the AI terrible ground to attack over. It would be tempting, right? So there is a kind of natural choke point between those streams, and it's kind of true, except that if I allow the CSA to get to those creeks, they then get, I think it's a 20% cover bonus or something once they get up and they get on them. So if I build too far back, yeah, we're going to build some cover and maybe be able to use some natural cover, but so is the AI. And so the way you'd want to build out this defense is actually build it to deny them cover, try to force them as much as possible to come through the open and then adjust from there. And I would also say that I know the way I'm going to play, I'm going to send this cavalry up first. Regardless of whether I'm attacking, defending, meeting engagement, which is pretty much just attacking for me anyways, I'm going to send my cav. If I have cav, I'm going to send them out to scout first. So they're not actually going to be part of any static defense, at least initially, and it's going to be on my infantry and artillery to hold that. And this might just be me. I hate double line. Right? I'm single line pretty much all the time, especially if I'm going to be static. If I want to move a brigade back, I'll do it. But when you zoom in this way, it'll give you a better idea of how wide your line actually is. And now, even though you're probably going to have far fewer engineering points, you can think about where you'd want to build out in front of here to deny them this cover. And the reason why I would build out here, in addition to kind of denying them this cover on their way in and forcing them to attack through the open where there's no natural cover, is that there is, in this position, there's kind of a secondary line of defense. So if it just appears that we are outflanked, I would fall back to this set of trees or this set of trees, more likely than not this one, because it looks like our friendly line is here in a not too good position. And by having our fortifications up here, if we lose them, they then can't be turned against us when we are back here. If I had built the fortifications, say, back here and tried to shoot them as they came up this creek, we lose them and then we're in cover, but then the AI, when they come into our whatever we build, they're then going to get the cover bonuses from those, and that would negate what we're trying to do. So we're trying to create two opportunities for us to shoot at them from cover, one line up here, and the second line, more than likely, it's going to be over here if we are the extreme left of the line. But that's how I'm reading this particular defense. All right, so because I'm going to end up deploying in the open, right? The terrain is suggesting that I deploy in the open because I have the engineering points. I know that I can deploy in the open, build up cover on one line, and then fall back. It's true. With all those engineering points, I could build probably 10 lines of defense. We don't need to do that. We don't want to do that. We'll build one line of defense because that's probably closer to what many of you are going to end up experiencing. So, I don't know why we have cavalry sounds randomly running. To build in the deployment phase, you get two options, parapets and breastworks. Once you hit play and you enter battle and you're not in a deployment phase, you can only build breastworks. My house rule, because I played this game a while, is then since the AI will never build breastworks outside of deployment zone, I don't either. Don't ask. They just will never do it. They've never done it in 1,100 hours. So, anyways, that's my house rule. And you can't build parapets outside of deployment. So, I'm going to do parapets because there's something I want to show you about them. You left click. You get this little fence thing that shows up. All right, great. You can always, I mean, I've modded the camera so we can get some angles, but you do want to pay attention to the ground and the terrain in this game. It does matter. Being slightly higher or just higher than your opponents will give you a range advantage, regardless of whether you're firing a big or a small gun. But I don't want them to be able to easily get to that creek, and so I'm going to build out a little bit further forward. And you do that by left-clicking. You drag. You left-click when you want it to... Well, if you want it to end there, you can just go over and click it. If you left-click, it'll stop building that leg. If you wanted to build another leg, you then just drag, left-click again, and on and on and on. When it's set up, you click yeah, and you can see now it's actually there. With no unit selected, and now you're hovering over it, and you see that the little fortifications button is back. You can now, and I cannot, okay, so that was a left click. So that was another left click, and that's a last left click. So if you have the engineering points, the second left click will give you reinforcements, and then you'll put out, I think it's abatis, and then I think obstacles are the level 4. And so this gives you a lot of cover and concealment, and it hinders enemy movement when they get up to your obstacles and abatis. If you're rich in engineering points, you can afford to do this, but we'll do it just kind of one last time here. Because they might get the creek, and I might... I'm almost certainly going to be slow in redeploying. It doesn't really matter. We'll do that, and then we're going to left-click again, left-click again, left-click again. And yeah, it looks like when these would interfere with an existing terrain feature, they don't actually appear, but I would bet that they're probably going to be there. All right, the next thing you're going to have to do is, well, that you probably should do, is put whatever static forces you're going to have in their place. It's mostly to just check and make sure that nobody is obstructing anyone's field of fire. So in the HQ, there is this tools button, and then you can select these on or off. Usually I play decluttered and I turn as much stuff off as I can, but I don't think most people do, and so we'll leave it on. But if you want to check and see, anywhere within that arc is what this is a battery, so that's why the range is ridiculous, and it's a parrot. So you got 10-pound parrots, and they'll be able to shoot anything that is in that range. For these guys with their mixed muskets, it's pretty terrible. For those guys with Enfields, you can see that they can shoot out beyond their abatis. Springfields, yep, they can too, and Springfield rifle muskets. Now, did you notice that there's a difference between that arc and that arc? Right, one is much wider than the other. I hesitate to, promote the cheese, but it's just one of the peculiarities of Grand Tactician that when you have units at an angled defense like this, fortification, they get a much wider arc. So I built, these are what the breastworks look like. If you wanted to, you could have 2 units here, and here they actually have good overlapping fields of fire, right? They're both going to be able to smoke anyone. They're going to be able to shoot units from here, right, all the way over to here, and even with small adjustments, because you want to still have them in that corner. There you go. Takes some finagling, but they can shoot a lot at that point. So anyways, if you think that might help you, then you can always note that peculiarity. And so if I were going for optimal builds, and I think that there's going to be a big AI push near that road, I would have bent these fortifications back on both sides like this so that there are angles pointing to it so that we could easily get those overlapping fields of fire really easily, right? With a small number of units could cover a lot. And then you can also build those into your trenches so that a relatively small number of units are going to be able to cover a whole lot of sectors in the line, as opposed to just shooting straight out in front of them. It's not a big deal. Won't dwell on it, but that is a little tip right there. All right, I think we're getting to the end if we're not already there, but we are at the point where we're about to hit play. There's not too much more we can do in our deployment phase, and so we got to get out of it. What I want to do is I want to make sure that my scouts are out. So you can, if you have a division command for your cav, or whoever's in charge of your cav, if it's more than one brigade, you can try to do it that way. Or if it's just a single brigade, you can click on the cav icon, you click scout, and you should see the little dots show up. Why does Weber? Oh, I clicked on Garfield. That's why. All right, and there they are. And sometimes when you click on the same unit twice, you'll see that this time it's 150 as opposed to the parent brigade, which has 1817 left in it after the 150 scouts were kicked out. Since I know I'm going to move my cav scouts, again, a lot of this is terrain dependent. In general, you want to move along roads unless moving along those roads would really carry you out of your way. This is probably going to be what reaches me before the push from over here. And unfortunately, we learned that some of our friendlies decided to break off from the main group that's defending back here. And so we have other problems that we've just learned about. And while we set up for a defense, this is actually a good, we're going to learn a little bit about attack here. But if we hadn't known that this was going to happen, we're planning solely on a defense. I would also scout this out, but it'd be less pressing. But I want my scouts up because otherwise it takes slightly longer to do. And my plan is to say, forget the roads. There are no fences that run, let's see if I get this math term right, perpendicular to us if we're going to go this way. If this fence was like bent this way, with cav especially, you want to avoid fences like the plague if you can. I would not have to run through this area. Cav models and fences do not mix. Most models and fences do not mix, but especially cav in my experience. So the plan is going to be to run forward and check this out first, and then we'll take a look at the Apple Pie Ridge. I know they're going, I'm playing with order delays on, which means I need to keep my commanders as close as possible. I'm in charge. We then have our two division commanders. I always want to keep the orders fastest near the units I think are likely to be taken by surprise. And so that's going to be the cav in this case. So they're about as close as they need to be for this. It doesn't really do you too much good to move the scouts anywhere because they're pretty much tethered to the parent unit. You also can just ride with the scouts in the units, and then where you get to where you want to scout, then with the unit stationary, you can just kick them out to scout. Sometimes it's easier to maneuver around stuff that way. I don't have a strong preference. If you don't know how to move the commander by themselves, you want to click on them, and then you want to hold. I'm doing left alt, and I right click, and that just moves your commander around. You can see why, right? Because the bugle range tells you where you have the shortest ones, and the larger range is the kind of overall command range. And so you want to keep the gaps between commanders and then commanders and the fighting units as small as possible. And so I'm going to try to keep myself close to Garfield and the cav. This gap over here, I mean, if you really want to get into it, you can move Ransom. He will now be slightly closer to me as I move away from him. But that's how you kind of plan your next moves. And final point, as we're now ready to get out of deployment and just turn briefly to movement, because I know about this, and by the way, I fought this battle, so I know it's happening. I now, even though I thought I had this great defense, we have to now think about maybe we need to move, but it's going to depend on where the AI comes in, because if they're all down here, they could either go up to Apple Pie Ridge, or a lot of times the AI is kind of drawn like a, I don't know, magnet, moth to a flame, whatever the analogy is, to the victory point, or until they run into enemies. And so it's possible if the AI comes down here, they may never even recognize this force. We don't know. All right, so I went ahead and pressed play, and I also made two other changes just for those of you who are really worried that your scouts aren't going to be able to see enough. In general, in this game, it's really easy, even with fog. So I have fog of war on. You can turn it off. It's really easy to find the AI. Like the game is far too generous in my view about telling you where the enemy is. But if you are worried about getting caught out, even with scouts out, you can switch in this case I have a Cav division, switch your stance to screen. They won't take any hard fights, and you can tell them to evade. It talks about harassing them, but with mounted fire from the flanks, but you're really not going to be doing that. You're mostly going to be focused on running. I'm going to try to stay with this group. So again, I'm holding left alt and I'm right clicking where I want to be because this is the highest ranking officer to give orders. You can see this is the order going out to Garfield. We become a little bit separated. I haven't really told him anything new, and I am moving to close that gap. Again, with Ransom, it's a little bit less important because if I need Ransom to move the infantry back here or the artillery, they have a lot of time to do it. So I'm not that worried about that. And we are over here scouting. I may pause you while we scout. All right, so we reached our initial objective to scout. And again, the game is very generous. I mean, if you want to see how generous, slow things down to normal speed. I mean, this is where we are on the battlefield, and yet we're being shown stuff on our map that's happening way beyond what we can see. And this one, we're getting a lot of friendly intelligence, and I think is fog of war maybe turned off? Maybe that's why. No, now it's really off. Well, it's just the visualization, but the game is pretty generous with what you can see. And what we've learned, and we're pretty sure, is it doesn't look like there's any force down here. To be sure, I'm going to move Harker up there. But I'm pretty sure we're in trouble here, and we'll pause things for a moment. Because this is a lot of men on our side. And we're in a bit of a pickle, because we do outnumber them by almost 50%. But just eyeballing that, if we lose that force and it gets entirely routed, it's probably going to be a lot closer to 50-50. You can also see from what's going on down here that the rest of our force is moving, and presumably they're going to move up here to bail them out. The concern is that we're going to show up piecemeal and that we're not going to be able to concentrate our force. So the plan has got to be, we've got to get ready to move, and since we're on the left, we're probably going to continue on the left. That means Ransom's force, and this is Ransom's force back here, needs to get up and moving, and to do that, we can start off by just giving them a movement order. Where might they want to move? We don't know how this is going to go. It doesn't look good for us. It looks like we're going to get absolutely walloped. And so you probably want to be a little bit conservative about where you place them. You can always stop them once you've given them movement orders. But we're going to tell them to advance there. Yeah, we'll try to engage any sort of enemy units that we can while they're moving. And we know we're going to be moving on roads. We can pretty much see the direction we're going to go. It's probably going to hug the roads because the roads should get them there pretty quickly. And to move as fast as possible, click that movement and click double time. So it does burn through your fatigue faster, but it's the beginning of the battle. You can see if you look down at fatigue, everybody is well rested, and so I'm not too worried about burning it. At this point, time is of the essence. The other issue is that when they get there, whoops, we, like the CSA on this side, are going to have to climb Apple Pie Ridge if the defenders are able to hold them back to their side. And so that's going to take additional stamina to climb hills rather than just walking over flat ground. But if they can hold, this is a very nice ridge. This is a very decent natural position. At the very least, it doesn't give us a whole lot of cover, but it does give us a range advantage over units of with similar type weapons. You can imagine where we might find some spots for artillery, and so we have to wait and see what that looks like. And I'm largely done saying what I gotta say. I'm gonna turn the speed up a little bit just so we can actually see our troops. You don't have to put Ransom, even if you wanted to. You don't have to put him in a marching column. What they're gonna do is they're gonna calculate how far it is and kind of whether it's more efficient. But you can see all the other brigades and the other divisions, they've already moved into marching columns because it is faster. They'll lose less stamina and so forth. And we want to start positioning some folks for what's coming next. I'm pretty certain there's nothing coming this way. And so now I can get all of Garfield's Cav division up there. I know that Ransom is coming this way, and honestly, I'm not worried about Ransom needing a quick reorder. I'm worried about Garfield needing one because of what I see going on up here. And it looks like with our Cav in the Vanguard, we should be able to see any sort of threats, and we can stop this movement if it's no good. Since I think these guys are going to be engaged soon, I'm looking to recall my scouts. When my scouts are out, I cannot dismount, and so you will take much higher casualties if you're mounted than if you're not. You get a little bit of a range advantage being mounted, but not much. This part of Apple Pie Ridge is unoccupied, so we're going to go for that with Weber and Harker. I don't want them running all the way over here. I don't want these units too far apart from one another. I can move Harker here, and if it ends up going bad, he can fall back to the river while Weber's up on the hill. But this should at least allow us to hold this ground for a little bit until friendly infantry come up, and then maybe we can start pushing them on the left. In the center, at least for now, you can tell who's going to get wiped, right? This brigade that's sticking out like a sore thumb is going to get flanked. But it does have some fairly well-placed infantry. I think this artillery group here in the center is going to get absolutely demolished. But that's not our problem. It's going to be our allies' problems, and we'll just see what we can do from there. Since I now know that my forces are going to end up over here, I'm going to give myself a new movement order. Garfield, I'm going to move over there as well. Again, I'm going to try to keep those lines as close as possible. And Ransom, sometimes after you manually move a commander, you then have to move them for the rest of the battle. It's happened this way on and off since the game came out. So it can actually end up increasing order delays if you don't keep microing them after that. But it looks like we're going to end up in an okay position to hold some ground and then maybe a counterattack. Alright, because our infantry is still a ways away, and it's not going great over here. I mean, they've done the push that I said they would, and they're starting to engage the actual defensive line. I want to try to maybe threaten their rear. These guys are really susceptible to any sort of hit in the flank. We only have one friendly brigade here that's not in my command. And I know that there are 2 infantry brigades and 2 artillery batteries. They also have, and this is why terrain matters, they also have a stone wall, which is, it is excellent terrain. That's what you want to see. It looks to me like Grover's already made the decision to go in. Right now, Weber is bugged out. When he moves, he should not appear as a dot. That's how skirmishers appear. The several dots is because I dismounted them and put them in loose formation. So that part is correct. But right now he's bugged out, so he's requiring a little bit more love than usual. I want to make sure that these folks are moving pretty quickly. Once we start moving, we really don't want to stop. Grover might end up being in the way. It is what it is. We don't want too much overlapping fire either, but they are set up to fire at their max range. With Cav, there's no way to adjust like there is with infantry, the range at which they fire. So hopefully, I think Grover's in a bad position, but we are going to move up. We're going to provide him a morale buff, and we're going to try to put a lot of casualties and hurt on those brigades. We're going to fast forward here in the interest of keeping this a bit busy. If there was any more than what's here, I would not consider this advisable. And if I didn't have the weapons that I know I do, so again, paying attention to everything here, that is a lie. They have Maynards, and those are pretty much the best cav rifles you're going to get. The AI correctly kind of refuses its flank for this attack. We still want to, even if they got the stone wall, it is what it is. We want to continue to press in there. Sometimes you have to kind of force the movement beyond what they want to do. Some of them don't want to stop, and you just got to kind of keep reordering the movement because we want to close range. One of the things we want to do with dismounted loose formation cav is get them close enough that we can go prone. Being in loose formation and prone, even if we don't get to the stone wall, it's going to give us comparable cover to what that infantry on a stone wall has. And by reforming this way, they got me out of their flank, but and the AI does this, it's the bane of their existence. they've now lost pretty much half of their firepower. So consider this a kind of partial tutorial on attacking. The bones here is pretty much what I would always advise. Take a look at the terrain, where you gotta go, look at the spacing of your commanders, lead with the cavalry, and preferably scouting until you see the enemy. Once you see the enemy and you have a good idea where they are, there's really no benefit at all to having your scouts out. Winning combat, you can keep your commander close but behind your troops. He'll provide them with a morale buff in case it becomes a kind of morale contest. And just over here, we're waiting for our forces to kind of poke along and get up to us. So I don't really feel the need to show the rest of this battle because it is just a tutorial trying to show you the basics. Again, this is the kind of 1.6 stuff that you'll see if you're playing Whiskey and Lemons. If you want to play with icons on, of course, that will give you more information. You'll learn more about the AI. But here, this brigade is close enough that we can just tell them to get down. Because they are bugged out, I don't know if we'll actually listen. But if you want to hear what they do, see, we routed a battery. That's not hard to do. Getting these brigades, we might be able to, but when you have icons on, you can see that they're flashing, and that means that they are wavering, and that they may break very soon. Even though they're a 3,000 strength brigade, we have taken very few casualties, under 60 casualties. Right now, with our range on, we see that some units, and look, you kind of notice this from the sprites, that a lot of the smoke from this unit is only coming off the right side because these units don't actually yet have line of sight. You'd have to adjust their facing in order to get everyone on. So you do want to pay attention to that, whether you are attacking or defending. But this cav unit, for example, has a peak on everyone, and we can actually readjust. Kind of want to, well, you don't want to do too much, which is always what I end up being guilty of. But you kind of want to do it so that everybody in the unit, or as many as possible in the unit, can get fire in them. So even though the AI maneuvered relatively well, the brigades there did not work together. We were able to fight them piecemeal. And now, what they are in danger of is that we're going to not just rout these units, we're going to get the Stonewall, shoot into the artillery. And then from here, we can start getting into the back of these lines. And so this attack may get broken from the back. And you can see this is just as friendly AI is making the same sins. They're actually worse at it than the enemy AI. They've completely stacked themselves up so that they're going to get 1v1 or several v1, and they're going to lose one at a time, but they're going to hope to do enough casualties overall that they're able to turn this around. But if they just kept a straighter line, we'd be able to avoid a lot of that. So, yeah, you can do a lot with Cav. They can be the most powerful tool on the battlefield. Notice that we're not prone yet. If we want to go prone, we want to make sure we have the best angle, and you then lose range, and you'll see how that arc, it's diminished. If you're not taking direct fire from the enemy, there's really no reason to go prone. You can see that this unit has only 9 casualties, and so going prone is just going to stop you short of what you're able to do. And you might as well stay standing until they turn to face you and start shooting you, and then you might want to think about going prone. But if you're willing to put that kind of micro in, because there's a relatively small number of units, you can get very good results. So, I think that's going to do it for the basic deployment and movement guide here. I think the next one we'll put out is one on cover and stances, which we previewed a little bit here, but we'll have some tests to show you just how important those stances and cover can be.